think that we have a really good chance of seeing some teams surprise us here at Champs this year. In fact, I actually want to give my team that I believe has the best chance of surprising, right? The team that I think has the best chance of being a dark horse come Champs time in just a few weeks. Now, before I give my specific team, before I kind of output what team I believe can be that dark horse, I do want to say something. I believe that this year, it is easier for a dark horse team to surprise us than in previous Champs years. Now, I do want to clarify. I want to clarify this because I am solely talking about the teams that are starting off in winner's bracket. We're not talking about the loser's bracket teams. We're not starting about a number of different rosters that are going to have to start off in loser's bracket, have single elimination throughout the rest of the tournament. We're not talking about that. But one thing that I want people to think about when we do talk about the teams that are going to be starting off in the winner's bracket is that they don't have to worry about certain things that they had to worry about, let's say last year, or at least in years previous, right? If you are a dark horse team, the positive for you is you don't have to worry about pool play, right? You don't have to worry about getting into this group with a number of different random amateur teams. Granted, at times, being in a certain pool can net you some easy victories, right? You can kind of get a decent amount of practice time off the start. But at the very least, if you are a dark horse team, not expected to maybe make it far, it's kind of nice. You don't have to worry about these group play games. You don't have to worry about trying to get the first seed in your group to make it so that you have a better position for the winner's bracket. You're not facing off against a number of different teams that you're not familiar with. And to go on top of that, you don't have to worry about playing a ton of matches every day, right? You have the ability to focus on one match at a time. I believe that the most matches that a team will play at Champs this this year, the most amount of matches you're going to have to play in a day is 2, right? That's it. And that's only if you go from the winner's bracket to, I believe, the loser's bracket, right? You get time to prepare. And that is one thing that you want on your side if you are a dark horse team, right? You want to be able to learn about the other rosters that you're going to be facing off against. If you're starting in the winner's bracket, you know some of these top teams. You played against them before. Now you get the time to ultimately prepare for them more than you ever have before. Also, and this isn't necessarily something that's based off of the format, but something that's based off of franchising, this year in comparison to others, you have a dedicated staff, right? You got coaches, you got analysts who are going to walk you through the preparation for each series. While you're guaranteed to play top teams early, with the way that this game works and with how tight the teams are currently, I think it's easier for a dark horse team to make a run if you're starting in the winner's bracket. Now, like I said, not based primarily on the format we're talking about this, but because of outside factors. All right, with that being said, the team that I believe has the best chance of surprising us this year in what will be the 8th Call of Duty World Championship is the New York Subliners. And the reason as for why I believe the New York Subliners have the best chance of being a dark horse team and making it far is, first of all, because they've shown us that they can win, right? There are a lot of rosters that people want to kind of throw out on paper and say, oh, this team, they have the chance to run. Or rather, if you want to choose a dark horse roster, oh, this team in particular. You got to consider the fact that teams who know that they can win have the confidence throughout all the remainder of the events of the season, right? Of every series they walk into, they know that they have done this before. Obviously, Champs, it is different. But the thing with New York is not only have they won, but they have won recently. And they won at their own home series back in New York, in which the team looked absolutely fantastic. We saw players like Zuma going off. Temp was back in form. Attach looked like he was at his best. Right, the rest of the team collectively looked excellent, and they were hitting their stride. So much so that they ended up going on a 9-map winning streak to close out the tournament. Now, one thing that you can't ignore, and I know as soon as I bring this up, there's going to be an instant counter, which I absolutely will address, because that was great for the Subliners, but it wasn't the last event the Subliners have played, right? They're not coming into Champs on a high note, to say the least. As, like I said, New York was not their last event. It was, in fact, the London Home Series, an event in which they lost to the Dallas Empire, happens, and later the Paris Legion, and they lost in a 3-0. I had the ability to cast over that match, and it was not a pretty sight. New York just did not really seem to show up, and I'm not giving them a pass. So that's not what I'm trying to set up here. I'm not trying to set up this idea that, oh, well, Legion made it to the finals and New York should have maybe had a closer series. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that New York should have won that series straight up, and that is the worry that I have kind of for the future of this team, as that they are coming off of a very shaky loss to the Legion. Despite them making a grand final, it is still Paris, a roster that you should be taking down, especially if you are coming off of a victory. That reason, that loss, that tournament definitely does not help my claim, nor help my confidence in them. But more than anything, the reason why I had the Subliners, the reason why I choose New York to be my dark horse, not just based off of their team, but just based off of a number of different reasons, the reason why I believe the Subliners have a chance at being a dark horse is because of their road, right? The journey that they have isn't actually as bad as it looks, right? You can look at it on paper and think, all right, okay, they got this team, then they got this team when it comes down to the next round. Okay, no, first off, starting in the winner's bracket. There's a plus, right? You start off in the winner's bracket. That is absolutely fantastic. It's the primary thing that we've been talking about all throughout the CDL is if you can get in the top 8 seeds, you have a massive advantage when we talk about your lifespan at Champs. First series that they're going to have, by the way, is against the newly formed Minnesota Rocker, right? The roster that we just talked about on this show a few days ago. Got our X, now benched. They bring in Exceed, obviously, who's been a sub player for them at times kind of throughout the year. He's been brought in for Alex during his kind of short injury period. But this is going to be that team's first official series at all, right? And I'll say this. Sometimes when you're facing off against a new team, it can be difficult to strategize. But I think that this is more of a positive than a negative, because this isn't just the Minnesota Rocker, after a while here. This isn't like, kind of in the middle of an event. No, this is their very first match with losing one of their best players in GodRx. Right now, they're bringing in Exceed. Excited to see him play. I've talked about it previously. Minnesota, I think that probably should have happened earlier. But nonetheless, you'll take this if you're New York, right? Also because you've beat this team in the last 2 times that you faced off. In the Florida home series, you beat them 3-0. And the New York home series, you beat them 3-1, in which every single map that New York won, it was not even close. You like the Subliners' chances, first off, because the Minnesota Rocker, they are not the Minnesota Rocker that we have seen previously. That could work out to their benefit, but for the majority of this major change that they're making, this is going to be their first series. And probably, in the very first map, they're trying to figure things out. And I think that's going to work to New York's advantage, especially when we talk about their strength in Game 1 hardpoints. Now, I'll briefly touch on their second match, if it does in fact happen, which would be versus the Chicago Huntsmen, right? It's never going to be an easy task. It's a hard matchup for the Subliners on paper. We talk about a team in Chicago who are arguably the best Game 1 and kind of Game 2 team in the world. They're the best hardpoint team. They're one of the best search and destroy teams. It is hard to really make a case here for the Subliners. But you have to consider that they have played a fair amount previously. And this series, in fact, would be the 5th time that they would have matched up this season. And they're currently, by the way, 2-2 on the year, with the most recent matchup happening at the New York home series finals, in which the Subliners took them down 3-0 in the grand final. So again, not a matchup that you'd like to have, but given this team's history versus Chicago, given this team's recent history versus Chicago, you're okay with this, right? It's not the worst thing in the world. You're also okay with this because of Chicago's recent performance, right? Toronto home series, they finish top 6. They lose to the Ultra in Game 5. They lose to Optic in a 3-1. This placement ties for the Huntsmen's worst on the year, right? The other top 6 performance coming just a few weeks ago, by the way, at Minnesota. It's not great for Huntsmen as of late. So if you are New York, I think you're okay with your first round. And I think you'll take your second round as well, which would net them against what would be, I believe, the Atlanta phase at that point. So again, if you can get through 2 early matchups, you have a great chance of kind of being that dark horse roster outside of everybody's, granted top 4, if you will. Now, I do have to admit, the Subliners' performance in London did scare me, right? I can try to throw out all the positives. New York at their best, that's great. It is hard to say that a team is going to shock the CDL after going from first to a 3-0 loss versus the Legion, right? But I also think that this loss can act as a good thing. And I know I'm being very optimistic, but I think that this loss can act as a positive for this team. I personally believe that the loss Atlanta FaZe suffered versus the Ultra is actually a good thing for them. And I know we've talked about that a lot throughout the entirety of the year. Oh, this is a good loss for a young team. This is a good loss for a team. In general, when we talk about Call of Duty esports, the mentality coming into this event is important. And realizing that you are vulnerable is a good thing. I think for a lot of these teams, it is going to help motivate you ahead of the big one. In fact, the biggest one that we have ever had in Call of Duty esports history, Champs, a $4.6 million prize pool. So I think if you are the Subliners, I'm not happy with the loss that you have over in London, but at the least, I think that they can improve from it, and I think that they have, and they will continue to get better. I think if they can beat the Rocker, if you beat the Huntsman, obviously that's a stretch, but it's still possible. They're guaranteed top 6 and have a great chance of making a loser's run from there. I will say this. If you are starting in winners round 1, being specific, winners round 1, it is just about making as much of a dent as you can, right? Trying to dig deep as far as you can in the winners bracket, make it as far as possible so you don't have to worry about losers. I've got confidence in the Subliners, and I believe that given their circumstance, given their recent performance, they have got the best chance of causing some upsets and being a dark horse team come Champs time.